Got it.
Welcome back to another TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja and this is Ange.
How you going?
Yeah, good. Now,
Good.
you've had an interesting week.
Yes. Well, I wasn't going to admit to this, but I will. Myself and some friends went out for dinner in the city the other night, and we decided, after watching all the pro-trans propaganda on the ABC, that we would go and give them a message. Now, we've been trying to talk to the ABC via letter, via email, via communication on social media, and they block and ban us, even for polite comment. And so we went round to the ABC with some chalk, and we wrote on the pavement, on the footpath, some messages like, men can never be lesbians, and report both sides of the trans argument and cover the debate. Adult, human, female, all the cliches of turfery. We wrote some of them, and some of our other concerns about the ABC indoctrinating children into the trans ideology. And we wrote our concerns very politely on the footpath because we didn't want to cause offence. However, we thought maybe if you were a trans identifying person, it may be offensive. Now, we had a lot of people walking past as we were doing it and asking us what we were doing and asking us about what we were actually writing. And every single person that came past gave us positive feedback, or they said, we didn't know they were doing that, or you've got to be kidding, they're not actually doing that, are they?
Wow.
Yeah. And so, we rode on the footpath and we saw none of the security came out, and we were trying to get the attention of the ABC radio, because we would be quite happy to talk to them and ask them why they don't cover both sides of the trans debate. And nobody came out, but we saw the guard ringing on the phone and we thought, oh, he's calling the cops. No cops turned up. And then, another hour later, because we covered like 50 meters of footpath. It was awesome. Just three of us. And then eventually some police show up, and they just get out of their car going on. And they said, the ABC called us and said you were graffitiing their building. And I said, no, we're actually drawing on the footpath with chalk. We're not damaging the building in any way. And he said, well, what are you writing? And I said, they refused to talk to us, so we're writing some political things, and it's not illegal to write political things. And he's like, oh, yeah. Oh, really? Oh, gee, that's, and they found that quite interesting. And I was explaining to these police officers the relationship that the ABC has with ACON, and that a lot of money changes hands between Victoria Police and the ABC in order for Victoria Police to do diversity training, but also they do that so that they get a big rainbow tick to be a workplace that is, inclusive, and they get all sorts of accolades for that. But a lot of taxpayer funds goes between ACON and Victoria Police. And in a way, it's like paying them to adopt this ideology, this gender ideology, to call criminals who are male and trans identifying, to call them women and things like that. So Victoria Police is being trained via ACON in order to, push this gender ID. So I was explaining to this cop, and I said, look, you write your reports on Neanderthal computers. You're understaffed, under-resourced, you've wasted your time coming here, and look at how much money is being diverted into this training that you're all doing that really has little relevance to your day-to-day policing. And he's going, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I think you're right. So it was really interesting. So every single person we encountered. But anyway, the cops asked us to give us our names, and we go, no, we're not doing it. And eventually they let us go because we're going, oh, we're just old ladies riding on the footpath. They leave us alone. And they eventually just wandered off, and their sergeant said, look, don't worry about it, let them go. And we left. And by the time we'd walked back to my car, the ABC had power washed every single thing we'd written off the footpath, because we'd actually hoped to write it, because we did it in the evening about 9:30 at night, and we thought that it would still be there by the morning. But it's like they were watching us, knowing full well that they were going to remove it straight away, but they still called the police. So rather than just wait for us to go and then wash it off, which was their intention, they deliberately called the police because they wanted to get us in trouble. Now, they didn't acknowledge us in any way. They wouldn't come when we were waving to them. They wouldn't talk to us. Their own security wouldn't even come out and tell us to go away, because we would have gone away. But they got the police, deliberately wasted police resources to come and tell 3 women off from chalking the footpath. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's pathetic, but well done.
It was fun.
And isn't that interesting, the response you get from passers-by, that they're just shocked, that they had no idea what's going on because the ABC isn't reporting on it, you know. That I think that's a really good sign, though. It
is. Every single person, not one person abused us or said, oh gee, that's horrible, or anything like that. And there were quite a few people.
Brilliant. Well done. There's another ABC action coming up in Sydney. I'll put a link in the description if people want to get in touch and take part in that, because last time up in Sydney they only got 5 women, so we'd love to see at least 20 if not more.
I don't understand that. Like, so many people, there's so many people online that are gender critical and are really concerned about what's happening, and yet when it comes to direct action, nobody will do it. And you've got nothing to be afraid of. I just don't understand it.
I think that's the thing. I mean, even for me, like I haven't done direct action before this issue came up for me. So I was a little bit nervous going to a protest organised by trans people. That was a bit you're just nervous and not knowing what to expect, and but it's easy, and when you've got a whole tribe of like 20 or 30 women, it's you make friends, and there's solidarity, you support each other. So I really encourage anyone watching to get involved if you can. And with COVID, you can wear a mask, no one will even know it's you.
And there was only 3 of us the other day, and what we did, because I posted it online and it got taken up and it's been spread all over the world, and people were sharing the posts about platforming these women and things like that. So 3 people made such a huge impact. Imagine what 50 people could do. That's right.
And you got I saw Women Are Human did an article on it.
That was cool. I was really surprised. Someone goes, oh, look, you're famous. But no, it was good. And it's so nice to have women and orgs supporting each other too.
Yeah, a lot of that going on. Well, speaking of the ABC, just today I watched Girl Like You, which is an hour-long documentary filmed over the space of, I think it was 5 years or 6 years or something, all focused on one man's transition to womanhood.
Well, that's what inspired our protest the other day, and this idea that the ABC is promoting, that men can be women, and also lesbians, which is so offensive. Of all the women who just have nothing to do with men, they target them specifically. And so we're quite outraged by that, and that's why we went and drew on their footpath. But I watched it too. I watched it when it premiered because I assumed that all the trans people would be talking about it. And I thought, no, I better watch this. And as much as I regretted it, and I was really surprised because it was billed by the ABC as a propaganda piece and a wonderful portrayal of a transition and the effect on a relationship, and that it was plugged as something that was incredibly positive. But my take on it, and the take of a lot of other people, was that it was like a chronology of a very abusive relationship where a very narcissistic man was financially, emotionally, every possible way abusing his female partner. And rather than all this celebration online after it aired, was silence, was absolute silence, because all those trans activists that were singing it up before it actually appeared would have seen themselves in the mirror and gone, oh, that's not a positive portrayal. But it was a realistic portrayal.
That's right. He came across as a selfish asshole, just to be honest.
Yeah.
And I feel for that woman so much, Lauren. I hope that now that it's gotten a bit of publicity, that someone has put her onto Trans Widows Voices. And hopefully she's been able to connect with other women that have been through this, because like even just the trailer, there were all these red flags that, oh, this guy, look, I just watched it today, and so I took a few notes. I won't go through all of them, but there was a really funny bit where he's talking about, oh, we've gone from being a straight couple to being a lesbian couple.
Oh.
Then it cuts to her and she's saying, well, he's not my boyfriend, but he's not my girlfriend either. It doesn't feel quite right to be calling him my girlfriend. And it just showed this this schism forming in their relationship. Look, I think it's actually done us a favor.
Yes.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law was a trans widow. Had got 2 sets of in-laws, and my eldest daughter's grandfather transitioned at the age of 65. And there back then was before Caitlyn Jenner. It was quite a few years ago now, and it had a devastating impact on my mother-in-law. She knew he had a bit of a fetish for women's undies, but she never imagined that her partner of 20 plus years would suddenly decide that he was actually a woman. It seemed preposterous to her because she's a woman. And that she actually ended off passing away within 2 years of him running away with the family's entire savings, because she took up drinking and got sepsis and died. And in my opinion, she actually died as a consequence of what he did, because it was such a devastating blow to the entire family. My daughter hasn't seen her grandfather since he transitioned. The grandmother was just in shock, in absolute shock. And she didn't deliberately go out to become a drunk and died of sepsis. But I think she died of a broken heart, because this person that she'd known for 20 plus years just became a completely different person, completely self-obsessed, stole their life savings, ran their business into the ground to get money to go and have his transition. Devastating. And the flow-on effects for my ex, my daughter's dad, and for my daughter and the other family members, it's been really hard for them. It's been really, really, really hard. Yeah, look, there was one trans widow story I watched. She was interviewed by Philia, the UK feminist group, and she thought that there was a really interesting one. She thought that he was having an affair. And he was lying about it, and she ended up following him one night, or she found a key to a storage container, and she was like, this is it, this is what the secret is, I've got to go and find out. So she went, and when she got to the storage container, it was thousands and thousands of dollars worth of brand name women's clothing. He had set up like a recording studio. He'd been recording tranny porn. I knew you were going to say that.
And she was, utterly betrayed.
Yeah.
And she and very similar to Girl Like You, this woman had been financially supporting him for years. He wasn't paying any rent, and it just, the themes that, the more that you read trans women's stories, that all have these themes running through them lying and gaslighting and financial abuse and all sorts of awful stuff. Yeah.
And self-centeredness, just absolute and utter selfish self-centeredness. And the just whole deception of, oh, I've always been a woman. You know, I'm trapped in the wrong body and I'm, 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years old. What a load of rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah. There was another interesting bit, the band breaking up. Because this guy's just crapping on about his transition the whole time. He sort of used the band as this way to ease himself into transitioning by cross-dressing when they were performing live. And one of the other bandmates was like, you're only cross-dressing when you're live on stage. Like, is that what you want this band to be about, or something like that? And in the end, the band breaks up, the relationship fails, and because he hasn't worked for 4.5 years, he ends up back at his mum and dad's place, or just his mum's. They didn't actually interview the dad at all, so I thought that was interesting. Yeah,
but they reckon that this much touted trans suicide rates, they actually say that the most likely time for someone who's had the full transition is 7 years after their last surgery. But I think that's got something to do with one, that they're all chasing a carrot that's never quite attainable, and then they get this surgery and it's meant to cure all their problems, but it doesn't relieve that obsession that they have. That attention, and 7 years after you've had your surgery, going on and on and on about yourself, you finally got what you said you always wanted. It wears thin. And I can understand why their mental health declines after they've gone through transition. One, because what's been promised doesn't fulfill them, and two, because everyone's sick to bloody death of them. It seemed like he burnt a lot of people. There was a really funny bit where she said she was talking about, I have to be the stable one in this relationship, I have to be here for him, and but really I'm dead inside. She used the words, I'm dead inside. And sad. And
his response was to say, welcome to the club, and laugh. Like, just, and he even said that at the end, something about him having a lack of empathy for the position that he'd put her in. And look, I just want to say to anyone out there, if you see these red flags in your relationship, or your partner's cross-dressing, get out while you can. Get out as soon as you can. Yeah. Look, the other thing watching that, my last boyfriend, we were only together for 3 months, but in that time, I noticed that he was a bit of a covert narcissist, like a poor me kind of narcissist, and that was what turned me off, and we broke up. But he also revealed a few things to me. One, that when he was in his teens, his mum had caught him trying on her pantyhose. And I didn't know any of this I didn't know that autogynephilia was a thing. I didn't know all this transgender stuff back then. And I did the same thing. I was like, oh, well, I still accept you, just like Paul Lauren in the show.
Yeah.
And then we went out to a pub one night and he put black eyeliner on, and I was a bit, I like my men to be manly. And then he before me, he had been in this on again, off again relationship for 14 years.
Wow. And
it sounded an abusive situation for both of them, I think. But he felt emasculated by her, so he started going to the peeing sitting down and then he started looking into buying the sort of prosthetic underwear that that trans women can get.
And he's telling you this stuff and you're going
But here's the thing, he blamed it on his ex-girlfriend. He was like, she emasculated me so much that I was at the point where I was going to buy this vagina underwear so that I could. And look, just reflecting on it now, like I've got a pretty low threshold for that poor me bullshit these days. So I dumped him after 3 months. We broke up. But reflecting on it now and knowing what I know now, like I think he's got autogynephilia, and I wouldn't be surprised if down the track he transitions in some form or another.
They're just out there.
Just scary, but yeah, like the guy in Girl Like You just reminded me so much of my ex.
Oh, he's horrible. He's just a horrible, horrible man.
Yeah.
And they're such a caricature of women too. Like they're just such a caricature. They're not, like I've noticed trans men, like women who adopt a male persona just seem to want to blend in usually. There's a few vocal ones on social media, but most of them just want to get on with their lives and go to work and live quietly. But these trans identifying men, these trans women are just over the top, and they're always hypersexualized, and they're always like, look at me. There's such a disparity.
Just reminded me of something he said towards the end. Was after they'd broken up, he says, none of this was my decision, or none of this was my making. Like, mate, take some fucking responsibility for yourself.
No, they don't.
You contributed 100% to this.
He had a choice.
Yeah.
He had a choice. He could have sought mental health treatment, because this dude didn't seek any mental health treatment. He could have sought mental health treatment for the issues that made him think that he was born in the wrong body. But no, he just went straight down the transition route like most of them do.
Yeah. Remember that bit where he's like researching some new medication that he wants to go on that'll nuke his testosterone testicles, and the side effects that they showed, like depression, suicidal ideation, hallucinations, and he goes for it anyway, and then later on he's complaining about the relationship and how she's giving him a hard time about something or other, and then he's like, meanwhile I'm sitting here thinking about killing myself. So it's like that weaponizing of suicide.
Yeah, because he wasn't saying it before. He wasn't saying I need to transition because I'm going to kill myself like some of them do. It actually got to the end where he thought, oh, I have to say this because that's what we have to say in order to get attention. That's how I interpreted it.
And that whole scene where he burns his birth certificate. It's like, I bet you $20. Oops, my phone's going off. Sorry. I bet you $20 that was his idea. He took that to the producers and said, I want you to film me doing this.
And he was doing it by himself because no one else cared.
Yeah.
Because they're like, all the things he was doing by himself, they're trying to make him look lonely. Everyone was sick of his crap. He was doing it because nobody cared. They didn't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah. Cracker. And it's worth a watch. Didn't paint them in a very good light. So
so there's another local AGP who's been in the news. Good old Dani Laidley has obviously rang up one of the newspapers, The Age, of course, and said, people are sharing photos of me taken at the Melbourne Cup. Now, apparently a couple of cops, and he got $200,000 out of the cops because they actually shared his mugshot when he got nicked for domestic violence charges and stalking. And those police did the wrong thing. They shared pictures of the once, famous AFL coach. They shared it amongst their peers. And that is against police regulations. So, those cops did the wrong thing. But $200,000. You know, rape victims don't get that. But anyway, so this guy's a domestic violence trans identifying, and he's in the news because he was at the Melbourne Cup, and anyone, could have been anybody at all, took a photo of him. I think it was in the ladies' toilets or something like that, wearing some ridiculously over the top, you know, dress, and in his full trans regalia. And apparently some police officers in their own time off duty shared it on their Facebook page or shared it amongst each other. And he's trying to get another 200,000 out of the cops because they're saying, oh, but police are sharing my images. It was a publicly image that was made public, shared among people not in their professional capacity. And he's rung up the paper and going, police are sharing my images again. Now, that's ridiculous, and that's him trying to get attention. But what I find most offensive about this bloke is a domestic violence perpetrator and a stalker. He has multiple victims, and yet he is now a tabloid darling as a victim, as a poor marginalised victim, because the mean police shared his mugshot. And every time he makes the media, which is unfortunately very often, he is referred to as she, and by his new name. And he is pandered to, and, you know, the police are grovelling and apologise to him. 2 police officers have lost their job over him. It's just despicable. And his poor victims, one of whom I have spoken to online, are just devastated. You know, they see him as male, a person who was stalking and threatening them, and he is now a victim, a female, and a media darling.
We see this so often with transgender. It's this inversion of reality, and it just had, so many aspects of it just inverts reality and flips things around. And so a stalker becomes a victim, and a man becomes a woman, an oppressed woman. It's just, it never ends, does it?
It's despicable, and those poor victims, and it's just despicable. He makes me so mad. But, you know, even as I'm talking about him, I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if he gets hold of this, because they're so litigious. Like these dudes, because they're unemployable, because their personalities are so bad, and they're, you know, they spent their whole time living up to their trans persona. They get their money by suing people, you know, or they've got a Patreon or a PayPal, or nearly every, you know, public trans person has got some grift going on. And in Laidley's case, it's suing the cops or suing anyone who does something that he doesn't like. It's ridiculous. And as I'm talking about him, and because we also have people we know have been dragged before tribunals and been ordered to pay tens of thousands of dollars to people, you know, I'm getting a bit paranoid. And as I have a reputation as a Melbourne TERF, you know, I'm scared someone's going to knock, knock, knock. Did you say something about Dani Laidley?
I reckon we could crowdfund for you if it happened. I reckon we could get enough.
Lock me up. But no, it's awful. It's awful that, you know, we have to be mindful. You know, these people, they shouldn't be so powerful in the media.
It really, there was an Iranian study that showed that transgender women have an unusually high rate of personality disorder, including narcissistic personality disorder. And it's all part of that, you know. And that's the thing with narcissists. They can't take mild criticism at all. It like damages them down deep in their soul, just mild criticism. And I think that's part of what's going on there.
Well, see, the thing with the police groveling to this person and to all the other trans-identified people that they called she, even a missing person. I had an argument with someone on Facebook with a missing person, a 17-year-old boy who was missing from South Gippsland. He was missing, and the police used his, you know, adopted name and referred to him as female. And he was clearly a male, a minor, And they were saying, has anyone seen, you know, blah, 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 whatever his name was. They misrepresented a missing person. That's how desperate they are to cling to this gender stuff. And it's all to do with this ACON and the money that's changing hands between Victoria Police and these trans orgs.
Yeah.
It's all to do with this accreditation and with the fear of litigation, with genuine fear that people will do a Laidley, and if they get called the wrong thing, if they get misgendered or some petty, pathetic thing, that the VicPol will be accountable. Now, I don't know about you, but, you know, there's so many victims of crime out there that they don't even get justice. But even if they do get their issue to court, there's no repatriation. If you're raped and your rapist gets charged, you can sue for victims of crime, but he's in prison. You're not going to get anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can misgender someone and get $200,000. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, shocking. Look, we've got our first guest in the waiting room, so I'm going to bring her in.
Yeah.
This is Michelle from Mana Wahine Korero.
Did you practice that?
No, I've memorized it. It's been in my head.
Well done. I get tongue-tied. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Is she in there? Oh, there she is.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
You're
Where are
right.
you?
Stream your video and your audio, love.
Yes. She's probably having a snooze. Oh, there she is.
A snooze. Hello, how are you?
See you.
How are you, Michelle?
Yeah, really well. How are you, Stassja? Ange?
Good.
Excellent.
We were just having a chat about what's his name? Dani Laidley.
Well, Dean Laidley, yeah. We're having a chat about him and about that show that was on the ABC and a few other things.
I don't watch the ABC. I haven't watched telly for years.
Yeah, good idea.
So, yeah, no idea. But I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, in good news today, I don't know if you have seen, but Senator Claire Chandler has just announced that she's drafting amendments to the Sex Discrimination Act. So that's really promising.
Woohoo! Yeah, no, it's excellent. I just saw that just before we came on.
Yeah.
Will they get through?
Look, she's introducing it as a private members bill. So we'll see. It's specifically around women's sports, but I'm hoping that she's going to include clauses around single-sex spaces, single-sex services. We'll find out.
Good.
Yeah, so that's a bit different to what's happening in New Zealand at the moment.
God. Yes, it is. Did you want to ask me a question, or you just want me to carry on? Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. So in New Zealand, firstly, I'm from Mana Wahine Korero, so I'm one of the founding members. Myself and Diane Landy came up with the idea to start a ropu, a group, speaking out against transgender ideology or gender identity ideology. Especially because it seems that our culture is being used, manipulated by Maori, by some Maori, and a lot of Pākehā, into aligning with gender identity when it's got nothing to do with gender identity whatsoever. And I know for me personally, when I first came on board to the gender identity fight here in Australia, I couldn't see any Indigenous women in particular speaking out on behalf of their people, or even just speaking out for themselves and, challenging all these claims about Indigenous cultures and how, you hear a lot about, two-spirit and especially like for Samoa, there's whaawhine as well. And it's all being tied up with transgenderism, and it's just not true, and especially for Maori, we don't even have a word in our culture for gender. There's no kupu for the word gender. There's no word for transgender. So we don't even have, usually if you're seeking to find out something about a culture, one of the things you look at is the language, right? So in our language, we just don't have that. Even this word that they are now promoting in New Zealand, takatapui, to mean intimate friend of the same sex, i.e., lesbian or gay. Not all hapu or tribes used that word at all. It's a fairly new word to the vernacular. We don't even have a word that describes intimate friend of the opposite sex. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of claims, unfounded claims about our culture. So anyway, so that's the reason why Diane Landy and I started Mana Wahine Korero. And of course, one of the stipulations that Di made was, if we're going to start this, Michelle, I'm definitely going to have my sisters on board, and that's Rex and Philippa Landy. Yeah. And everyone knows Rex Landy.
Rex has become infamous, hasn't she?
Yeah, she has. She really has.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious because, in the beginning of Mana Wahine Korero, thinking about, oh gosh, how can we get the word out there? What are we going to do? Because we can sit here and, write posts on Facebook and Twitter.
Like we do.
Yeah. Like everyone else does, But is that going to make an impact? Are people going to understand that we are, we're Maori and we are speaking, we're not the face of the race. We have to make that very clear. We are not speaking on behalf of all Maori. No one does and no one can, okay? But we're speaking on behalf of what we know, of what we, like I was raised in my culture, so I understand. I'm telling you now, there's no such thing as, even gender ideology, this idea that, women must cook and, in our culture, the men do the cooking, pretty much. I mean, not all the time, but, at the end of the day, our culture is very, very, very simple, very straightforward. It's not complex. You have tane and wahine, and that's it. There's and everything is built around that. And even our rangatira, our leaders, they all had, well, I guess here comes one, gender, I guess, aspect to it is, a lot of our rangatira, they had, quite a few wives. But, we're talking about different times back then, times when it was all about survival. They didn't have the luxury of having multiple partners just for fun. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about survival here, the continuation of the generations and all that kind of stuff. So the reason why Diane Landy and I started Mana Wahine Korero, along with her sisters as well, is because, we felt that we needed to speak up about this, because in New Zealand, you're quite right, there's a lot of very different things going on. They have a Labour party in government in New Zealand, led by Jacinda Ardern, in case people don't know that. And I'm just going to cut to the chase. They're very, very woke, and they use Māori, our culture, as some excuse to pass, self-ID and the self-ID bill, as well as the conversion practices prohibition bill. So and it's very concerning because we've already been colonized before. Right. Our language has already been colonized. Much of what we have retained has come, we're still missing. There's a lot missing, and that's typical with most Indigenous, people who have been colonized. There's a massive blank there for obvious reasons, because colonization.
And there are parallels between Maori culture and Aboriginal culture with relation to that too. And I have not seen any Aboriginal women speak up about this, even though they are deeply affected by it. And I also noticed that there are, cultural considerations there too, that they have men's business and women's business.
That's right.
And there's never been a history of them mixing together.
Oh, like the local people where I live, they have made it quite abundantly clear that only men ever play the didgeridoo, never women.
Yeah.
And I would never ever challenge that, So, just simple things like that. So
you had an opportunity to ask, well, what about a trans man? Could they play the didgeridoo?
I haven't asked, but I've been messaged by a few local Aboriginals saying, they don't say anything on Facebook, but they've said to me, yeah, this is rubbish. It's got nothing to do with our culture. You know, I mean, you know, obviously I won't say their names or anything, but, you know, they know, we all know.
Yeah.
You know, but the reality is too that going back to these bills that are currently before Parliament in New Zealand, a lot of our people, for example, don't even know that these bills are before Parliament.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's all very surreptitious.
So do you think you, being a Victorian and having, like, living in Victoria now and having been through this self-ID thing yourself, that you've been able to help your New Zealand sisters navigate this process?
It's a different process. Not really, no. I just,
Okay.
you know, that they're aware of, you know, they read the legislation and all that kind of thing. So, but the one thing I will say about, especially the conversion practices prohibition bill, is that it's taken, a lot of it's been taken from the Victorian laws, and it actually states that in fine print down the bottom in the New Zealand bill. So, and that's one of the things that, you know, for us, that we found concerning, because our Declaration of Independence, you've probably heard us speak about it, it's called He Whakaputanga. It actually sets forth, Article 2 of He Whakaputanga states quite clearly that foreigners will not be allowed to make or frame laws. Okay, so, but having said all this about the Declaration of Independence, the New Zealand government have largely ignored the Declaration of Independence. You know, and it'd be for good reason. It's because they don't want to have to, you know, go through all the entanglement of, you know, having that added to the mix when it comes to especially writing up laws like this. Oh, that's my guess, by the way. That's my guesstimate anyway on that.
And isn't there some clause in New Zealand laws where Maori have to be consulted on new legislation that affects them or something like that?
So they're working around that, but yes. So Te Tiriti o Waitangi is so I should clarify. Okay, so He Whakaputanga, the Declaration of Independence, it actually covers all people of New Tirene or New Zealand. So you don't have to be Maori. It's, you know, all hapu is how it's written in the declaration. All hapu means all people, Pākehā, Maori, whoever is in New Zealand, right? So that's a Declaration of Independence. And that declaration sets forth that the tribes of New Zealand declare their absolute sovereign authority and leadership over all their lands. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence came first, and then 5 years after was Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Treaty of Waitangi. Now, in the treaty, which is what you're thinking about, I'm thinking, Stassja. So in the treaty, it is in fact an agreement between hapu, so Māori, and the Crown. Okay, so this is between Māori and the Crown. So in the treaty, Article 2 actually states that the Crown agrees to protect rangatira, our leaders, and hapu, so all the sub-tribes, in our unqualified exercise of chieftainship over land, villages, and taonga. And taonga means treasure. Or treasure, or, you know, something of value to us.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where that comes in. But look, it is a long tradition of pretty much not consulting iwi. you know what I mean. So what they pretty much did was they signed off on the treaty and then pretty much ignored it, because the wars, the land wars of New Zealand actually came after Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
Right.
Yeah, so people often think it's the other way around, but it's not actually. They signed it first and then they had their wars. So yeah.
Two-faced.
Yeah.
Two-faced.
Yeah, pretty much. And we're still fighting that, you know, two-faced attitude to this day.
Yeah.
So I guess, and so for the way that we've approached it as Mana Wahine Korero is, you know, we looked at the bills, the proposed legislations, and you know, we didn't really, I mean, with some of the clauses we addressed, but more to the point, our point was, even before you get to that place of writing up the bills, the legislation, you haven't even consulted us. You've not even told us what's going on. You know, we approached
Victoria.
Well, Victoria. Yeah, they definitely they kept that under wraps, definitely. And also too, in Victoria, unlike New Zealand, in New Zealand they're pushing both of these through at pretty much at the same time. So what they're saying in the self-ID in the self-ID laws is that gender identity is fluid and malleable, you know, because they're allowing people to change their sex or gender as often as they want in their lifetime, pretty much. And then in the Conversion Practices Prohibition Bill in New Zealand, they're saying, especially for children, that gender is fixed and you can't change it whatsoever, you know. Whereas in Victoria, we didn't know that the conversion therapy bill was going to happen when they pushed through the self-ID bill, if that makes sense.
Did you see that in the UK, their self-ID bills kind of backfired, and there's an MP that's pushing to make sure that that actually trying to convince someone that they're the wrong gender is also an offence. So rather than just have it be an offence to say, oh no, you're not really trans, it is now an offence to suggest and coerce someone into believing they're trans. So they're trying to get that added onto their self-ID bill. Conversion therapy bill.
Yeah, I did read that, and I was actually, that's what I thought at first when I first read that, Ange, about the UK, what you're talking about in the UK. But then someone said to me, no, that's wrong, Michelle. They're, you know, but it's that, and that's the thing about all of this. It's so confusing because the moment you start pulling apart reality, then there's no tether to understanding what on earth we're talking about, you know. So
that's deliberate. This whole thing, it's deliberate. It's gaslighting. It's confusing. I mean, us three, we're all over this argument, and yet we're confused between us. The three of us have a different perception of absolutely everything we talk about.
Yeah.
And how have you found the New Zealand process of making submissions and even getting the chance to do the oral submission compared to what it's been like here in Victoria?
Well, I guess because, I'll be honest, I can't even remember the self-ID for Victoria. It feels like years ago that happened. Years ago, but look, for both of them, they're nerve-wracking anyway for anyone, because you're desperately trying to, you know, like you just said, and trying to figure out what on earth these bills are meaning, trying to get a translation, the legal jargon as well, trying to get your head around that. But for Mana Wahine Korero, because the approach is an Indigenous approach or a native approach, very, very different. So for Victoria, the group that I founded, Women's Action Group, we it was just to do with the bill itself. But for Mana Wahine Korero, like I was saying before, we addressed these bills, even before it got to the point of being written. We're saying, well, hang on, you've not consulted us. And so we went through and we listed out a whole heap of areas of concern in relation to our culture. So they're different approaches, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I watched your oral submissions. I think you did really well. Well done.
Really good.
I should have asked this at the beginning, but and you've probably been asked a million times, so apologies, but can you explain to us what Mana Wahine Korero means?
Oh yeah, sure. Mana Wahine Korero, I guess the closest translation is sovereign women speak. So that's the closest translation. Mana can mean, there's a lot of, translations for the word mana, but that's essentially what it means. So that's what we're going for. Mana Wahine Korero, sovereign women speak.
Excellent. Excellent.
Where's it at now, Michelle, in New Zealand? Have they shoveled it through, or
trying to?
Hope? Yeah,
they're trying to. So what's happened is that the self-ID
came out, didn't it? They released a report on the self-ID.
Correct. Yeah. So submissions now, oral submissions, all of it has closed now for the self-ID, it's the SOP 59, so the Supplementary Order Paper 59 for the BDMRR, which is the Births, Deaths, Marriages and Relationships Registration Bill. So submissions have closed for that. The committee have, as you said, Stassja, provided their report. And look, it hasn't, the report offers suggestions for changes as a result of the submissions that they've heard and that they've read, right? As far as I can tell, they've pretty much ignored the submissions that challenged the bill or that were against the bill. So, you know, I mean, I read it a few times, and yeah, it'll probably go through. But what I did read, I might be wrong on this, so, you know, anyone watching, feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure that they said that they're going to be discussing it next year, in January.
Okay.
That's what I read. So that's where that's at, the self-ID. But for the conversions, the conversion practices prohibition bill, up until last week at least, they were still hearing oral submissions.
Yeah.
But they had over 100,000 submissions.
Wow.
For that, yeah. Whereas on the self-ID, it wasn't as many. I mean, it was a lot, but not as many. But yeah, over 100,000. So they've got I hope they do, you know, due diligence and work through all the submissions. But what they also did too, which I don't recall that they did in Victoria, is that they opened submissions on both these bills to overseas submitters. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah. I saw Stella O'Malley's submission.
Oh, yeah.
She did an excellent job.
Oh, she did a brilliant job. She did a marvelous job. You know, and what I've got to say, what struck me, and I guess it's partly the reason, I guess, why, you know, our oral submissions were the way that they were, is that they invite everyone from overseas to submit, and in the moment they have overseas submitters, they treat them terribly. They're so rude to them. It's embarrassing watching watching New Zealand MPs, you know, and these are people, obviously all of us submitters, we don't get paid to do this work. Like, it took hours and hours and hours to do, you know, put our written submissions together, hours, you know, then we had to sit down and do our oral submissions as well. We're not paid for this, you know, they are, you know, they're sitting on the public purse, getting paid quite a bit of money to listen to us, you know.
I think they were more rude to you. I thought the way that they spoke over Maori women about their cultural concerns, and there's these, you know, white, you know, women typing, just ignoring you, or eating or whatever, and talking over you, this man shouting over these, you know, women talking about their culture and their history. It was despicable.
Look, used to it, I'll be honest, you know, so, but it's more so, you know, for me, you know, I totally appreciate what you're saying, and I guess that's kind of why I responded the way I did to Deborah Russell when she gave Di and I a question at the end of our submission, because I mean, she kind of gave it away too, because even she calls trans men women.
Yeah,
she tripped herself up, so even she doesn't believe that they're men.
Yeah,
you know, so don't come at us.
It was obvious that no matter what you said or did, it was obvious their minds had been made up.
That's right. That's why I didn't hold back, you know.
Good. It was great. It was good to see. Really good.
I also saw Genevieve Gluck. I don't know.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Her submission on, I think it was the self-ID one, was really good. And at the end, and at the end, Deborah, or one of them.
That's her, Deborah Russell, the same woman that questioned, that gave us the question.
Yeah, is saying, yes, but this isn't happening in New Zealand, blah, blah, blah. And I can't remember it now, but Genevieve handled it really well. She's like, yes, well, we're telling you what could happen in New Zealand if you introduce these.
Well, there's two things to that. Deborah Russell lied. She outright lied. It is happening in jails in New Zealand. Yeah. And we gave evidence of that in our submission. So, you know, and she knows this. So she lied. She outright lied about that. And secondly, it's their job as legislators to predict possible outcomes, you know, good or bad. You know, you can't. Yeah, that's what they get paid to do. But, you know, she was incredibly rude to Genevieve. I was so furious about that. But yeah, there are plenty of men at the minute in New Zealand incarcerated who are claiming to be women and being put into women's prison. There was a submitter, I can't remember his name at the minute. I can get back to you with the name so we can put it in the description under the video if you like. And he gave a submission, and he all he said was he works in law enforcement, and he knows of 3 women currently in New Zealand prisons that are pregnant as a result of a man or men being put into women's prisons.
Oh no.
Yeah. So, you know, so Deborah Russell lied when she said that to Genevieve. Oh, it's not happening. Yes, it is happening in New Zealand. And I don't know, I haven't actually checked for the last few weeks, I'll be honest, but at least last month, there was a case against a man who was put in a woman's prison, and the accusation against him was that he'd sexually assaulted a woman. So yeah, so because, well, last month it was before the courts, his name, he's got name suppression, so we don't know who it is. So it is happening in New Zealand.
Yeah. And Indigenous women in both Australia and New Zealand are overrepresented in prison. So
Correct.
This impacts on them more than anybody.
Correct. That's absolutely true, Angie. You know, and this is, you know, we've been saying this for a long time. You know, what are we saying when we say, oh yeah, men, violent men even, are women, and then allow them to be, you know, imprisoned or incarcerated with women as well? Like you say, Angie, you know, it's our sisters in there. And also too, you know, the crimes that men commit versus the crimes that women commit, I mean, they're just you know, leagues apart. There's
Aboriginal women that are in jail for fines, not fines, like parking fines, because they don't have the money to pay.
Exactly.
And they're in jail for fines, and male sex offenders are being put in women's prisons.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where we see this, and that's why we're saying, you know, and I know you're saying it as well, but, you know, this is so unfair on women and wahine.
It's racist.
It's incredibly racist, And, you know, and this is the other thing too, I've got to say this, I can't get out of my head, but, you know, we, at the minute, back home, we have middle-aged Pākehā or white men going around in, you know, gaudy makeup, awful wigs, and calling themselves takatapui. You know, and it's like, oh my God, you know, like our elders, our tipuna, our ancestors, I'm sure they'd be turning in their grave at that, you know, like I am. I'm not in my grave, but, you know, it's just hideously racist, all of it.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to wrap it up in about 5 minutes, I reckon.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think is going to happen ultimately in New Zealand?
They'll pass.
Yeah.
There'll be a sledgehammer through for sure.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? They haven't allowed, because of lockdowns, the impact of self-ID in Melbourne hasn't been felt.
No, that's right.
It's beginning to be felt now that we're coming out of lockdown. The men are actually in the women's spaces, all emboldened because the media has made them sound like they're untouchable.
Yeah.
And they haven't waited long enough for the consequences before they shove the New Zealand bills through.
Yeah. And this is the thing too, you know, New Zealand, they know what's going on. You know, they pretend that, you know, oh, it's not happening in New Zealand. That's, you know, what makes New Zealand any better than any other country where these men live and hail from? You know, what makes them nothing, you know, it's all the same, you know, and for the most part, as we know, they're autogynephilic, you know, they're all AGP pretty much. You know, the sad thing, you know, for me at least, is when I hear our rangatahi, our young people, you know, they're all swept up by this ideology, because I don't really know why, to be honest. But, you know, obviously there's the marketing aspect to it, you know, it's pretty much wherever you go. There was a woman in the UK, I think her name was Millie Hill, is that right? Yeah, and she was going to speak on Zoom, I think it was, online, at a conference of some kind, a midwifery conference, I think it was.
Midwives, yeah.
Yeah, for midwife in New Zealand, yeah, so it's for New Zealand. And she was removed, well, ended up that there was a petition made against her about her, I think, and you know about all this, Stars, you know it's better than me.
I did a counter petition.
Yes, you did a marvelous counter petition. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your petition gained more signatures than the petition that was against Millie Hill. Is that right? Is that correct?
I should know the answer to that.
No, that's right.
Well done.
No, I'm pretty sure that's the case. Well, I could be wrong. Anyway, but what struck us was in that petition against Millie Hill were claims about the Maori culture. And see, this is what we're seeing happen, and not just with transgender stuff, but with you know, quite a few things, is that academia is starting to creep into Maori culture. And that's because today, right now, there are far more Maori academics and Maori MPs than we've ever had before. Okay. Now, academia, as you would know, is not Maori at all. It's not Maori. Our leaders were never academics at all, and that today they're still not. And so, Maori are not a homogenous group. We have sub-tribes. So, I'm from a different tribe to Dai, and then other Maori. We're all from, and we all believe, our beliefs aren't too far apart, but there are different beliefs and different observations, I guess you could say, according to where we're from as well, because up north of New Zealand is, the temperature, the climate, the land, very, very different to down south, for example, So anyway, so getting back to this petition, so we officially complained, I don't know if I shared the letter actually, but we complained to the New Zealand College of Midwifery about the petition against, or the woman who put the petition, who, started the petition against Millie Hill, because of her claims, erroneous claims about Te Ao Māori, about our culture in relation to gender identity. Because, and I did read a bit of Millie's stuff back when it was happening, what she promotes is a very, well, number one, sex is, sex is a fact, and that is totally in line with our culture. We don't believe that humans can change sex. It's just anyone that tells you that Māori, believe that humans can change sex, that's an outright lie. Send them to me if you want, outright lie. So, because Millie, obviously she understands biological sex, our culture would likely be more in line with what she's saying, if you see what I'm saying. But in the petition against her, she's a Greens MP over there, Dr. Elizabeth Kerekere was mentioned, right?
I was going to ask you about her.
Yeah.
So, you have to say about Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Kerekere. So she is an academic first and an artist, by the way, there's nothing wrong with being an artist, but I'm just, so she's not actually a medical doctor. She's a doctor of art, I believe. She's a Greens MP. She's part Māori. Not that that matters, you can, but the point I'm making there is that, she's not my rangatira. She's not Dai's rangatira. She's not the leader of any hapu that we're aware of. She's definitely not our leader. Do you know what I'm saying? Just because she's an academic and just because she's an MP does not mean she speaks for all Māori. Like I said, we don't speak for all Māori either. But what she's put out there in her thesis, pretty much, I don't know if you've read it. I don't recommend anyone read it, but you can read it to check out what I'm saying at least. Pretty much lies about the mod, and it was all very personalized. It kind of came across, when you read a thesis, and by the way, there are some wonderful, I've read a few, other Māori academics who have written their thesis, and, beautiful, they've really, what they've done is they've, like as a thesis, what I think anyway should do is take you on a journey, a journey of discovery about whatever it is, the subject that, that they're writing about, and especially about the culture. But Elizabeth started from a point of takatapui definitely existed. Do you know what I mean? And then she went on to justify everything. And I'm saying sorry to my dog. It was a dog's breakfast. It really was a dog's breakfast, and like in page 82, and I'm sure, you've heard this, but on page 82 of her thesis, she states that there is not yet evidence that Māori had diverse gender identities or that takatapui played specific roles in pre-colonial times. On that, we agree with her. On that, Mana Wahine Korero agree with her. There is no evidence. So, if there was, we would have known about it years ago. I would have been raised, and with that thinking, but I wasn't.
I got to say, she just came across as so smug and arrogant in those committee hearings.
She is.
There must be a real sense of betrayal amongst Maori women about how she's handling this.
and it's not just her too, but you know, her definitely, because for some reason she's become the leader of all Maori. She's not, you know. But also to other group. Well, there's another women's group, and by the way, Maori Women's Welfare League has been going for years now. We're talking, I think it started back in the 50s or 60s maybe. So it's been going on for a long, long time. Okay, and even they are falling for the self-ID. Well, and to be fair, I must clarify this. It's more so the leader, because the leader of the Māori Women's Welfare League, her partner is also an MP. Louisa Wall is her name.
Oh,
yeah,
her,
exactly. Yeah, Louisa Wall. So she was just as bad.
Yeah,
you know?
she was.
And I can tell you for a fact that there are women in the Māori Women's Welfare League who haven't even heard of self-ID, don't even understand what is going on with gender identity. We've actually had one moko, so a descendant of one of the founding members of Māori Women's Welfare League, approach us and tell us how disgusted she is at what is happening, because, you know, there was never, from the beginning, from the start of Māori Women's Welfare League, there was nothing said about men being women or women being men. Nothing whatsoever. You know, our elders understood quite clearly that women are women. Sorry, Angie.
The daily impacts of men in these spaces would be catastrophic. Women's spaces.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm just thinking about it, like you said, Angie, because we've been in lockdown, we haven't had a chance really to experience it, you know,
I've experienced men in women only spaces, and it's left me feeling sick.
Yeah. I mean, I have too, sorry, but what I mean as in like full on, you know, like day in, day out, day in, day out is what I mean. But on the marae, okay, so that's where we all meet. These are, do you know what I mean when I say marae or pa? Okay, all right. So Angie knows that. So our pa, or our meeting houses, are our traditional, that's our hub for each Māori, or each hapu, sorry, each tribe has their own marae, their own pa. Okay, so on the pa, there are certain cultural observances, or observations, I should say, that everyone must respect. Okay, so one of them is that, just for example, the karanga, the calling out, is almost always done by wahine. There's one hapu that I know of up north, I think it might be Dai's hapu actually, where they do allow men, but they don't call it karanga, they call it something else. But in my hapu, only women ever karanga. And the reason for that is because only women bring forth life. So it's very, very important to know that, you know, and this is the other thing that happens when we have MPs like Elizabeth Kerekere and Louisa Wall, you know, cheering on the self-ID. They don't talk about stuff like that. I've not heard them say anything like that before, and they won't say, I mean, I'm tipping that they won't, because it will reveal that they are lying about gender identity and Māori culture. You know, so just simple things like that.
You just made me think of something I saw about an Aboriginal culture up in Northern Australia somewhere, where they did the scarification on men across their chests. Okay. And in asking them about, you know, why they do it, blah, blah, blah. And it was this sort of because women bleed and don't die, this was men's way of emulating that. And they said something along the lines of, women are already whole, but men have to go through this scarification stuff. Yeah, I just found it fascinating. Yeah,
right. Well, I mean, even in Māori culture, you know, women have the chin moko and the lips and the chin. Sometimes the nose, if they're a tohunga. Like in my hapu, for example, a lot of women were tohunga. Witch doctor, I guess you could say. That's not really a good translation, but yeah. So yeah, in my hapu, they were, you know. And then the men had a full facial moko, and
she's frozen.
Some of them, like I know for my rangatira, he was actually full body tattoo. Oh,
yeah. Sorry, you froze for a bit.
Oh, did I? Okay, so sorry. Where did I get up to? Yes. Oh, it's telling me my internet connection is unstable. Victorian weather, Angie. You said it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I was just saying, so for the men, they had full body, full facial. Some of them had full body, like I know that my rangatira had full body tattoo as well. So those differences, like if we truly believed that men could be women, surely one of the things we'd find is we'd have men with just a chin and lip, tamok or nothing else. And we don't have that. We just don't.
Yeah.
It's erasing history.
It's
is. Like, thousands and thousands and thousands of years of history erased if you allow someone from the opposite sex to participate in things that are not of their business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's despicable.
Yep, that's right.
All right. Well, look, I think we better wrap it up there. But thanks so much for coming on, Michelle.
No worries. Thanks. Good to see you too, to see both of you. And thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
No, I think we learnt a lot. So cheers. Cheers.
No worries. Bye. Okay. Ka kite.
Bye.
Bye. Actually, I don't. Oh, good. She left herself. Good. All right. Well, that was good. That was really good. Michelle's a great person to talk to on this stuff. She was one of the first people I spoke with on the phone when I first got involved. So really good to hear from her.
Great educator.
Yeah. I forgot to ask her peak trans moment.
Oh, no. Yeah, everyone's got one or 10.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Ange. And thanks
you
everyone for watching. And we'll see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye. Hang on. Where's the record button gone? Sorry. Oh, shit. I'm going to have to.
They're stuck with us. Oh, no.
I'm going to have to edit the end. Oh, there it is. Okay. Bye.
Bye.